Our next presenter is Rich Lopez from Litehouse Foods. You may also recognize him as the Quantrix Authority on YouTube. Rich has over 300 instructional videos online. I highly suggest you check them out if you haven't already. Thank you for being here, Rich. I'm excited to hand it over to you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks to the Quantrix team for an awesome conference, and thanks to the other presenters. They've been exceptional. So I'm Rich Lopez. I'm the financial modeling manager here at Litehouse Foods. That's the, I guess, role I come to you in today. And I want to share with you just a model that I have here at that I have here at Litehouse that's helping us manage our business right now during this inflationary time period. So Litehouse Foods, it started as a refrigerated salad dressing company, and it's evolved into an offering. It's evolved into a company that offers various food products across multiple brands. We have Litehouse, Sky Valley, Organicville, Green Garden, and VeggieCraft Farms, to name a few of our brands. And we have used Quantrix to provide micro-level price variance forecasting for more than 1,000 ingredient SKUs across our manufacturing facilities in the United States. Inflation, the last 2 years, has caused the cost of goods in all cases to increase significantly, while impacting some of our core ingredients to double in cost. This has been a tremendous challenge for Litehouse to navigate, and Quantrix Modeler and Quantrix Cloud are absolutely essential for us in gathering the data that we need from our buyers in order to produce a forecast of what our costs of goods sold are going to be in these unprecedented times. And one of the measures that we use, or a metric that we use to consider our cost of goods sold, is known as purchase price variance. So we, at the end of each year, we set a standard cost for all of our ingredients, and then we report to that standard, and then we measure to that standard for each of our ingredients throughout the year. And whether that variance to the standard is positive or negative, it impacts our P&L. So for example, here in this simple example, I have part A. We set a standard price of $10. It actually costs us $10.25. So we would overspend when we buy this product by 25 cents. If we multiply that by the number of units that we purchased, then we have an unfavorable purchase price variance of $250. Okay. The inverse of that is with part B here. It falls at 25 cents less than what our standard cost is. If we multiply that by our purchase quantity, then we are actually favorable in our PPV. And again, this directly impacts our P&L statement. And so being able to monitor what our purchase price variance is going to be is absolutely essential to us in making strategic decisions on how to manage the business. And I'll talk about a few of those strategic decisions towards the end of my presentation. So what this tool does is it allows us to, again, just make better decisions, real-time decisions with what our actual versus standard costs are. Essential to this tool is something known as the bill of materials. So we have, for example, a jar of 13-ounce home-style ranch dressing. The schematic on the top shows you kind of how that is made. We have a formulation that goes into the finished good. That's an actual dressing, but then we have actually spice or cheese or buttermilk that goes into that formulation. And then we have packaging that's associated with the finished good, also packaging that's associated with the spice or the formulation. So a bill of materials is essential to us in understanding our ingredients. Well, it is our ingredients, but it's also essential to us understanding our costs. So 5 years ago, we didn't have any way of knowing really what our bill of materials were for all of our products at Litehouse Foods. If you wanted to get a bill of materials, you would have to go finish good by finish good, export it from our ERP system, and then manually manipulate it in Excel. And that was a very time-consuming and tedious process. With a colleague of mine, using standard query language, we've been able to automate the process of generating our bill of materials for all of our finished goods across all of our facilities. And I'm able to do that using standard query language, and now that takes less than, I want to say, 2 minutes to generate a bill of materials that's consumable for us for all of our finished goods. And the way that I control this execution of the stored procedure in standard query language is actually I use a Quantrix model, and I use Quantrix Cloud and the automation feature on Quantrix Cloud, which each morning, I want to say about 5:30 in the morning, it kicks off the stored procedure that goes ahead and regenerates my entire bill of materials. So having a bill of materials is only part of our problem of with costs. We also need to know, how much of each of these ingredients goes in to, say, a jar of 13-ounce dressing. So this is where I have this is where I actually have a Quantrix model that goes ahead and takes my bill of materials, and then it looks at the levels of the bill of materials, and it calculates for me what percentage or what part of each of these ingredients ends up in the ultimate jar of dressing, if you will. So for example, I have this finished good right here. It has these 3 intermediate parts here. And then within the finished good and the intermediate parts, there are these input parts. There's 40 of them that go into this one bottle of dressing. Using Quantrix, I then calculate how much of each of those input parts actually end up in the bottle of dressing. Again, pre 5 years ago, for us to be able to calculate this in any sort of scale was across all of our SKUs it was impossible. It would take a good plant accountant probably 10 to 15 minutes to be able to calculate this for one finished good. But using this Quantrix tool that I've developed, it's automated. It runs for me every morning, and I can generate this within 5 minutes to generate all of these ratios that are then pushed out to the database. What then happens is we then join that to our forecast. And once we join it to our forecast, we can then get an ingredient demand need by month for each of our ingredients based off of the finished good forecast that we have. So this is just an absolute essential part of running our business during these times of inflation here at Litehouse Foods. I will say that this process that we have, it's been in use for 5 years. This tool has worked flawlessly every day for 365 days a year for those 5 years. Have had very little troubles with it. It's just automatic. There has been, of course, some iterations on refinement and whatnot of the logic, but Quantrix Cloud and Quantrix itself has proven essential for us in calculating these ratios. So then we take this bill of materials ratio information, we then marry it to a forecast, and then we go to what is known as the PPV, or our purchase price variance model here at Litehouse. And I want to bring that up now. So this is a terrific tool in the fact that it's in Quantrix, and Quantrix is awesome for the fact that it has the capability to attach to several different data sources, and then you as a user can meld those data sources as you wish within your model and model your business, right? So for example, in the data browser here and the data connections in this model, I have over 20 connections going out to different databases. So I have 2 different databases on SQL Server that I'm going out and pulling information from. I also have an ERP system that is not Microsoft SQL Server, it's actually Oracle. So I'm going directly to my ERP system and I'm pulling information into the model. And then also I have actually a stored procedure that's listed right here, where I'm actually taking the BOMs ratios calculation that I showed you in the previous slide, and then I'm marrying that to the sales forecast to get my ingredient demand. So that's a stored procedure that I'm also executing here in Quantrix using data import. I do have some parameters that are controlling some of this information. So I have this model administrator canvas that makes those parameters front and center to the administrator when they go in and update this. Also, I have created the capability here of a matrix where when the script is executed, as the script is executed to update data references, I go ahead and have it write out to this matrix when that script or when that data import was updated. That way, as an end user, I can see when the last time was that I did a full refresh of the data, so I know whether or not my data is current or it's old. But again, Quantrix's ability to go to all these different data sources and combine them is it's absolutely essential, and it's totally rad. It does it very, very smoothly for us at the click of a button. Also, this tool is being used by several of our buyers. It's also being used by our manager of accounting. So I have to have different views or perspectives for them to use and to navigate through. So I know that yesterday, in yesterday's conference, we talked a lot about, I think it was called smart buttons. Sorry if I'm not remembering the name of that feature exactly, but what I've done before smart buttons, because we don't even have them yet, is I've just created these scripts. And all they are scripts that open perspectives. So if you go up here, you can see that I have several different perspectives in this model. And then I've added these perspectives to scripts, if you will. So all the user has to do is click around and they can go and see the part of the model that pertains to them. Fair enough? Also with this, I have different users within the model. I have 3 different buyers that could be in the model at any one time. And as I was developing this model and showing it to the buyers, they gave me feedback and said, we don't want to see all of the part codes that we only want to see the part codes that we're responsible for. We don't want to see the part codes that we don't want to see all of the part codes. So what I did is some of that information lives in our ERP system about who owns what part codes. I was able to pull that information here into the Quantrix model, and then based off of the person and their view of one of these matrices, I have a filter. This is similar to what Erica was doing in the role name, but I have a filter here that's based off an expression that is based off of kind of some logic that marries part codes by users. And I put this into play before the role name. Possibly I'll end up using role name, but this works for us pretty good right now. And the beauty is here is if I'm Billy S, then I only have the part codes that apply to me as Billy S. Furthermore, I gave them that. It still wasn't good enough. They wanted to then be able to say, well, maybe I just don't want the part codes that are applicable to me, but I want to see just a subset of those part codes. I have these different types of groupings, so I just want to see the group of part codes. So what I've done is I created some constrained input over here, and I've said, well, Billy S is responsible for these forecast groups. So if Billy goes in and selects whatever group it is, they can go up here, and then they'll then see only those part codes that are associated with that forecast group. Furthermore, that wasn't even good enough. They wanted to be able to say, well, what if I just want to see a particular part code? I don't want to have to filter through all of this list, right? So again, just trying to make it easier for the end user, I went and said, well, you can go ahead and put in a part code here. And then what happens is it filters just the part codes down that are applicable to whatever has been entered here. So again, multiple users in the model at one time on Quantrix Cloud making changes, and them being able to only see the data that they need to has been absolutely imperative for them in order for them to adopt the usage of this tool. Also with this model, as we're trying to manage our costs and forecast what our costs are, we try to make informed decisions. And in order to make informed decisions, we need to see lots of cost information. So within this kind of PPV engine, it's kind of the main part of the model. I have to pull in lots of different cost information. So I have my standard cost. That's a cost that we set at the end of each year for the following year. And then I have my last cost. What did I actually buy it for? What was my last PO's cost, my last purchase order cost? And then I have something called my last group cost. So maybe I want to see not just the individual cost, but I also want to know, as a kind of a product group, how are my costs rolling up? Is my last cost in line with my product group cost? So again, just another data point to help the buyer try to determine really what their forecasted cost is going to be and what should be put in that forecasted cost. Furthermore, the buyers also, this is just a new development as of within the last 2 months, is they said, hey, we're putting even some of our cost information within the ERP system directly. And we want to be able to see those costs that we put in there for the future. We want to see it in this model so we don't have to do it 2 different ways. And so what I did, again, I went directly to the ERP system. I've been able to pull in that future cost here for them to use. And then ultimately, the user can look at these costs and they can say, well, that's all fine and dandy, but I think this is going to be my forecasted cost. And maybe that's because of, just some information that they've had as they've been looking at the markets or talking with suppliers. They can then put in a cost and that becomes the override cost. You may notice that my use doesn't actually match my override cost in this example with this oil. And the reason why is because our business dictates that we actually add an additional cost to certain part codes. So I have made it so that a user can put in a part code, have it be by facility, by year, any additional cost that they need to add on to the cost that's entered here. And that really applies to freight for a certain number of our commodities. So again, it's trying to give them kind of this total cost, if you will, in the way that they're used to doing it and the way they want to do it. That being said, this is some logic on how I actually determine whether or not, or how I determine which cost I should use, whether it's standard, last, or product group cost, or my forecasted cost. And I realize this is kind of a hairy formula, right? But the beauty about Quantrix that we can all appreciate and that I'm trying to give a shout out to here is that I have formula syntax highlighting here. It directs me to where I have logic going to other parts of my model. I'm also able to go ahead and add some notes into my formula. Also, this is a large switch statement, but with the control enter functionality of Quantrix when writing formulas, each one of these lines is just a different argument of that switch formula. So again, natural language formulas, it allows me to debug this when I need to in a more efficient manner than I could ever do in a traditional spreadsheet. Another thing about costs, because we haven't talked about costs enough here, is that the users also wanted to be able to apply a growth rate across the cost by, say, product group, and they wanted to have that be by specific time periods. So I've given them the capability to make that happen here. If you watch my latest episode on YouTube, you'll have to forgive me. That's 324 or 325. I can't remember right now. It came out last week. Anyway, if you watch that episode, I show you how I implemented this kind of product group costing. And so that episode is of this model, if you will, and this functionality. So lots of costs, lots of inputs, but really seems pretty complex. But for the user, it's pretty simple in the fact that they've got the information, they make a decision based on, and they just have to put it here in the override or they put it here in the product group. So lots going on, but to the end user, it's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. Look at your data, then input what you think it's going to be. Okay. Erica spoke a little bit about this also in her presentation, but one thing that's absolutely essential with managing our costs here and doing our forecasting and how it's going to impact our P&L or how things are rolling up is we need to be able to push it to other downstream systems. So here I have the capability to push the information using data push. I've got 3 data pushes on this model going to 3 different tables on the same database that is then consumed. We consume it in Tableau. We consume it in our, of course, our financial forecast that hits the P&L, as well as we consume this information in our standards calculations at the end of the year. And one way that I do my data pushes is I always push it with a version. So I have here just a matrix that has a version that I'm creating right here. And what I do on my data pushes as I go data push, I can edit this data push. And again, this is going to SQL Server. I'm calling in the version here from here. And I've got my connection set up. But then what happens is I don't overwrite my data in this table. It's one thing I rarely do because I like to version my information. And so what I do here is, are you kidding me? It must be a demo. Oh, it's killing me today. Anyway, what I do here is I have some standard query language in pre and post SQL that's after this step. I'm not going to put in my password and show everybody what our passwords are to our connections here, but know that there's another step here. You've probably seen it on data push on, and you can put in some custom pre and post SQL. So what I do is I go out and I say, hey, delete everything from the table that I'm pushing to where my version is equal to this version here. And what that does is it just overwrites the version and it keeps all the other versions. So again, this allows us to do, we do some what if scenario planning in here by putting in our overrides. We then push it out. We can then report on it using Tableau, and we can see what the impact is to our P&L based off of what our costs are doing. Furthermore, I have the ability here to summarize the data. And just a kind of a high level roll up of, what are we doing with PPV? What does it look like as far as tariffs and other PPV, again, being forecast in this model? I can look at it also by product group, so if, say, I guess anchovy paste or whatever, if it's causing us a problem or we see that it's going through the roof, well, for example, egg, all these numbers are fictitious, by the way, but let's say that egg, I've got an unfavorable PPV of $4.8 million. I can figure out, I can go maybe back to the supplier, talk through that. I can talk with the R&D team about saying, is there any sort of substitute we can come up with? Did it get our costs lower? So this tool and its output is essential to us in negotiating price with our vendors and helping us to know what our quantity and what our demand is going to be needed, what our demand need is going to be in the future. Also, we've used this model just within the last year and a half. We analyzed whether or not we needed to change some of our ingredients because, for example, one of our oils doubled, almost tripled in cost. And, oil is a major component of most of our products here. So we had to make a decision whether or not we should stick with that oil, stick with those suppliers, or should we switch to a different oil and different suppliers? And we were able to run that through this BOM ratios information as well as this tool and see what kind of impact that would make to really our P&L and our bottom line. Of course, that's one data point to have this type of information with costing. Of course, when you're making decisions about changing ingredients, you have to consider, your flavor profile, other downstream impacts. But certainly this is a helpful data point that was essential. I know that 6 years ago, when I first started here at Litehouse, I think egg prices were going through the roof, and we had no idea how that was going to impact our business. We knew at a macro level that was going to impact our business substantially, but really we were just kind of shooting in the dark on how to manage that. And now with this tool, it allows us to at least have information at a really granular finished good part level of how things are, how these prices are impacting things. And so this tool, it's beneficial to us along with the BOM ratios. Just this last Monday, I was being asked questions about strategic pricing and whether or not the purchase price variance what our purchase price variance was for a finished good. And so using the output of this information, comparing it with production information, and then marrying it back to our purchase price variance for our ingredients, I was able to determine, what is the finished good purchase price variance? How are we deviating from what our standard is for a finished good? And with that, we're then able to go to the sales team and talk with them about any strategic pricing decisions that we need to make in order for us to be a viable company going forward. And I think that's pretty much it. I do want to share one more thing here. I always like a little bit of motivation. And so I'll try to share that with you here. There was a gentleman, his name's Richard G. Scott. He directed the development of nuclear fuel for a wide variety of naval and land-based power plants. When you're dealing with nuclear fuel, that's pretty impressive. That's more complex than salad dressing and sauces. But I appreciated what he had to say in the fact that he said that through diligent work, you can accomplish things that have never been done before. And I believe that's the case with Quantrix Modeler. This tool is allowing us to do things that have never been done before at Litehouse Foods, and it's absolutely essential. And one final plug here. This is just maybe a little Quantrix Authority related, so please bear with me. I've been working on creating an ebook to help people learn Quantrix much faster. So by the end of the year, I like to think that I will have a ebook. It's about 81 pages of how you can learn Quantrix in 60 minutes. There's 5 chapters in there. And there's also a foreword here by the man, the myth, the legend, Peter Mary, who's the founder of Quantrix. And so I would just invite you to keep an eye on quantrixauthority.com, and I'll be having a book that's there available for you to take a look at and try to learn Quantrix. Do you have any questions?
Awesome presentation, Rich, and thank you for all of your support of Quantrix. It means a lot. We do have some questions here. So this is a bit of a general question, I guess, but can you tell us a bit about your process for improving models and finding ways to scale or enhance models over time?
Well, in particular to this model here, I started out by taking all the bill of materials information, bringing it into a model, and then comparing it to the forecast, and it was just gigantic. The calculation took, I want to say, 3 to 5 minutes to, and then anytime a user was going to make a change, it would take 3 minutes to calculate. So it just wasn't user friendly. So I had to think, I guess, outside of Quantrix, if you will. And I had to say, okay, I can move this to SQL Server. And that's what I ended up doing, is moving a lot of the calculation and the heavy lifting out to SQL Server. I think generally all of my models are very iterative in the fact that, a business partner comes to me with a need. I sit down with them. I try to scope out that model or the needs. I think about the structure, of course, my dimensions, my categories, and I start to build it out. But it's really, I'm building a lot of stuff for end users. So it's really just having a good partnership with them, talking with them, and making sure that that they're pleased with what I'm producing, and it's giving them the results. So I think a lot of it's just communication and an open dialogue. And just over time, Quantrix, natural language formulas, it really allows you to make adaptions very easily and to make modifications.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rich. We are at the time, but I just wanted to say that we have a lot of people in the chat that are excited for this book, including people wanting autographs. And additionally, we have a special message from Tahir asking for you to continue with the awesome videos. So thank you again for all of your support.